In this video, I'm going to go over 7 things I wish I knew before I started producing gospel music. My name is Bailey, and if this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers, and I would love to celebrate that with you. So a little backstory on my production career as a producer. I do consider myself a gospel producer, so to speak. There's no other genre that I feel as comfortable with as gospel music, because gospel music has been my only focus for the past 10 years or so. So I got my first MacBook, my first computer, maybe in 2013 or so. I saved up all of my paychecks from church to get my MacBook. And when I got my first MacBook, I got straight to production and started working on arrangements. I probably got hired to do my first track for an artist 2 years later after getting my first MacBook or so. At that point, just starting out doing productions and arrangements, I didn't know much. I was figuring it out along the way. The first thing that I'm going to go over that I wish I knew when I first started doing gospel music was stop quantizing your keys. I would quantize the keys because I was like, the keys has to be perfect. They have to sound super clean, and there can't be any mistakes. It needs to be on the grid. So I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to come up with some random groove at 120. So check this out. So back in the day, this is what I would have done if I did a groove like this. I would have came over here and I would have quantized the keys, and this is what it would sound like. Which you're listening to this and you're probably saying, this sounds really, really clean. It's on the grid. It's hitting where it needs to hit at. And yes, that's true. But what happens is when you quantize keys, it starts sounding super, super fake and unrealistic. It really sounds amateur to me when I hear productions that the keys are quantized and everything is just on the grid. What sounds better is when you take these keys and you turn the quantize off. This feels better to me. Check this out. And please don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying have your keys sloppy and not being on the grid, but I think there's something very realistic and unique about when the keys aren't quantized. It sounds more realistic and it just feels more right when the keys aren't quantized. The next thing that I wish I knew when I first started doing gospel music is how to properly bounce out a session for a mix engineer. So what do I mean by that? So when I first did my first production, I'm going to show you what I did. My first production, when I bounced it out and sent it over for mixing, the mix engineer got a whole bunch of files. The files weren't named properly. Like, the mix engineer got a bunch of cluttered files. And thankfully, the guy that I was working with, shout out to Justin, he didn't crucify me because he knew that it was my first track that I had sent to him to get mixed. But that's a huge mistake. You need to know how to send your files properly. So this is how I bounce files these days. Let's say all of this is aux, right? I would group these within this folder right here, and I would name this aux. And let's say that these 2 tracks are keys. I would group these together, name it keys, and I would slide it underneath here. So therefore, when I send out the track to the mix engineer, all he would have to worry about is, oh, the aux is right here. Oh, the bass is right here. The keys are right here. Your mix engineer does not need to get all these different files, saw wave 1, sine wave, percussion 2, tambourine. Like, group your stuff together, and the things that you need to be separate, separate those things. Like, if you need your bells to be separated, separate that, but your keys should be together. Your aux stuff, your synth stuff should be together, and the things that you want your mix engineer to have more control over, send that to him separate. The number 3 thing that I wish I knew when I first started doing gospel music production is your best drum samples are going to be in gear. I had a Phantom for a long time. I used to go on the hunt for shakers, snaps, tambourines. Like, I would study the West Coast sound a lot, and I would try to recreate the loops that I used to hear Mike Burrell make. But I would always notice that he had particular samples like snaps and particular shakers that I could not find anywhere on the internet. I would go on the internet for hours and search for samples, and I could never find them. And I used to be like, where do they get these samples from? And someone told me a while back, like, these samples come from keyboards. Some of these samples come from other producers that have done work in the industry, but your best drum samples are going to come from the keyboard gear that you have. Even the Yamaha motif has a lot of great drum samples to use when you're making loops. Why is the loop so important? Because the loop in gospel music is almost like one of those foundational instruments. Like, if your loop is smacking, if your keys is smacking, you're able to really come up with a good arrangement, because those are good foundational things. But thankfully today you don't have to go deep diving and searching for samples all across the internet. You have companies like Gospel Producers. They release loop elements, and they release West Coast elements, I believe. You have my website. I release drum samples like snaps, shakers, and things to make loops on. That stuff is more accessible today than it was even 10 or 15 years ago. Shout out to like Splice and those websites as well. The number 4 thing that I wish that I knew was how to really build a solid foundation when creating your songs. So when you're creating your songs, you want to start with the loop first. You want to start with keys. You want to start with Rhodes and organ, and really start building from that foundation. One of the things that I go over a lot when I teach gospel music production is build your foundation first. Loop, keys, bass, even drums can go in there, like if you do key drums and stuff like that. But I wish someone told me, learn how to build a solid foundation before adding all the synths and the bells and all the other stuff. Like, if you have a solid foundation, your production can only grow and get better from there. The next thing that I wish that I knew is, before you start your song or your production, have a vision for your track. Just don't start your production and just start going for it. Like, really paint out that vision before you start and really have an idea where you're going. One of the disadvantages, I think, when you're first starting, which can actually be an advantage, but when you're just so new to doing production, you really don't have a workflow on how to create a production. You're really just trying out things. I think it's really cool to be in that stage of when you're just learning and you're first starting out and you're just exploring different sounds and stuff like that. But I wish someone would have told me, or I wish I would have learned that, hey, have a vision for your track. Like, if you're working for an artist, or if you're trying to write a song, you know that song is going to be upbeat. What do you want that song to sound like? Do you want it to be synth heavy? Do you want it to feel like a classic gospel song? Or do you want to take the CCM route? If you want to take the CCM route, what are the sounds that you should be using or thinking about using to really make this feel CCM? So I wish that I would have had more of a clear vision for my tracks when I first started. The next thing that I wish that I knew is your price is your price. Now, this is some knowledge and some wisdom that I came about later. And even right now in this season I'm in, I'm still learning this conversation. When I first started playing and producing music, I didn't consider myself a producer because I was just learning. I was just starting. I was still getting my reps up, so I wasn't that great at what I was doing. The first person to ever reach out to me, I forgot what state they was in, but they reached out to me and it was like, hey, I heard your music on SoundCloud. How much do you charge to do music? Like, how much would you charge to produce my song? And I said, send the track over. I'll do it for free. I said something along them lines, and he was like, no, I have to pay you for what you're doing. Like, I've heard your work before on SoundCloud. So being that I was so new to it, I didn't know my worth. I didn't even know that what I did was worth paying for. So I said, send me $20 and I'll do your track.
What the?
Long story short, he sent me over the $20, and I was excited. Like, I felt really, really good because I'm like, dang, someone's paying me to do something that I do for free. Like, let's do it. So I did the track for $20. He loved the track, and it worked out really, really good. But down the line, what I started noticing was I wanted to help everyone out. Even within the last couple of years, like, I would cut my price in half, or, you know, change my price just to help people out. And what I've learned now is I'm willing just to send my regular rate. Like, it takes so much work to create a gospel record, and it takes so much time. So I'm willing these days to just accept, like, hey, if you're not ready to work, like, it's okay. Just reach back out when you are ready, or you're able to afford me, so to speak. So what I've learned is my price, and I don't need to be willing to always change my price to try to help someone else out. Now, that's not to say I don't help people out, but at the same time, I can't be going into deficit or stressing myself out in the name of trying to help someone else out. And when it's all said and done, I only hurt myself in the end because I didn't charge my rate. I'm kind of doing myself and my time a disservice if I keep on changing my price. The next thing that I wish I would have done when I first started doing gospel music is I wish I would have shot my shot more and reached out to more producers when I first started doing production. What do I mean by that? I feel like when I first started really getting good at gospel music and really started understanding the language, looking back now, I feel like there would have been some OGs that would have loved to let me be a part of their records if only they knew about me, or if only I was willing to reach out and say, hey, this is what I do. This is some work that I've done. I would love to work with you. I wish I would have done that more. Now, do I suggest everyone to go do that? No, not really. But unless you shoot your shot and try and reach out to people, you never know who's willing to bring you along to help you out as you help them out in some way. The last thing that I wish I knew when I first started doing music production is I wish I would have invested in myself more. I used to be scared to really spend money on my hobby of music production because I'm like, I'm so new to this. I don't really know what I'm doing. I may be wasting my money if I stop doing music production. And looking back now, I'm like, that's a stupid thought. But the example that I will give you is I remember when I saved up for my first MacBook, it was between getting the 8 gigabytes of RAM or getting the 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now, remind you, at this point, this is probably like 2015. So being that I was trying to save money, I went with the 8 gigabytes of RAM versus just spending like an extra $300 or $400 to get 16 gigabytes of RAM. Now, remind you, I was only working at church at that point. Church wasn't paying me that crazy enough to be able to have an extra $300 or $400 laying around to get the 16 gigabytes of RAM. But at the same time, looking back now, I would tell my younger self, save for the 16 gigabytes of RAM, get what you need so that you don't have to sell that MacBook within a year or two when you start running out of space, not having enough RAM to run your sessions. So that is one of the things that I wish I did. I wish I would have invested in myself more and not been afraid to spend money on certain gear that I wanted when I was younger. So those are 7 things that I wish that I knew when I first started doing music production. I hope that you learned something new, and I hope that you found some value in this video. If you have yet to like this video and subscribe to my channel, please do that. And please comment down below. Tell me what you think. Can you relate to any of the things that I went over in this video? That's all we got for today. We out.